That's okay.
On behalf of the Office of Public Health, warmly welcome our distinguished speakers and participants who have joined us for this webinar titled Seedbeds for Change, Re-conceptualizing the Family as a Space for Fostering the Equality of the Sexes. As a part of this series of engendering equality over the past few years, our office has been exploring, along with numerous individuals, organizations, and groups, the discourse on the principle of advancing the equality of women and men. And from this conversation, a distinct thread of this discourse has emerged, focusing on the role of men as promoters of the equality of the sexes. Naturally, these conversations have frequently revolved around the family as a fundamental social institution where conceptions related to the role of women and men are learned and practiced. So this webinar is being organized to explore the kind of changes that the family as an institution would need to undergo to serve as a seedbed for the concepts, attitudes, and values that promote the equality of the sexes and to model the kind of transformation that society as a whole would need to achieve. Not only is the family the first space where we learn those patterns of thought and behavior that are associated with being a man or a woman, it also provides the structure where these conceptions are given concrete shape in the form of well-defined gender roles. We all know that this is the most powerful space where children learn qualities such as being kind, compassionate, empathetic, honest, fair, and just. But at the same time, it is also in the family where children learn harmful attitudes and habits that are carried as adults from this family to society. Thus, society's advancements towards the goal of the equality of women and men will remain superficial unless a simultaneous effort is made to refashion the family as an institution that embodies this principle to ever higher degrees. Like many institutions in the world today, the institutions of the family is in a state of flux. Inherited conceptions of what a family must be like are increasingly being buffeted and rendered obsolete by the forces of social, cultural, and economic change. What is clear is that the model of a family that manifests the principle of the equality of women and men will not come from borrowing templates from the past or from passive and uncritical submission to the forces of modernity. It requires a conscious and conscientious process of learning on the part of society as a whole. It is to contribute to such a process of learning that the office has initiated these discussions. And we have identified 4 areas which are really important to explore. One of the areas is sharing the functions of nurturance and caregiving. As we know that one of the fundamental functions that a family performs is to educate and nurture children and to take care of the sick and the old. And traditionally, women have played a major role in providing this services of caregiving, nurturing, the supervision of the educational needs of children, and of the maintenance of an orderly, clean, safe, and healthy home. And these forms of service are often not valued and are taken for granted. Another theme that we would like to explore in this webinar is consultation as a basis for decision making, which is another important area that we need to look at. If decision making in a family is not to be an outcome of arbitrary and dictatorial authority, members of the family will need to learn to communicate with each other with respect and openness, drawing on a whole range of qualities such as love, humility, tact, empathy, courtesy, and moderation. The capacity to consult in a loving, considerate, yet frank manner in arriving at collective decisions is an art whose value humanity is only beginning to appreciate. However, mastery of this art will be crucial for mature and responsible decision making. The family will naturally be one of the primary spaces where members will have the opportunity to learn this art. Developing an outward orientation is another area that we need to look at. While the family strives to achieve the well-being of each of its members, its integrity as an institution serving the social goods demands that the ultimate purpose of the family must always be towards serving the well-being of the larger society. A family that is conscious of its moral responsibility as a building block of society will always be outward oriented. So we thought that this area would be very interesting to explore more. Another area which I think you all are familiar with, and there are many organizations, institutions that are working on it, and I'm sure our speakers will also share more insights on this, is the domestic violence, which has increased also during this pandemic. While the family is the space where individuals experience love and encouragement, it is also often the setting of their first encounter with grave injustices. We are conscious of the fact that one of the worst forms of injustices perpetrated in the family, especially against girls and women, is violence. The physical and sexual abuse are the most egregious manifestations of violence. And we all have seen like how pandemic has also increased. Due to the pandemic, this has also increased. I would like to request the participants can also post their questions to the speakers below in Q&A section. And we are also live on Facebook. So our viewers on Facebook can also post questions on Facebook Live. So, so I would like to invite now the first speaker, Dr. Bijayalaxmi Nanda, Acting Principal, Miranda House, University of Delhi. Dr. Nanda received her PhD from the Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal University, New Delhi. Her research interests include gender, political theory, and human rights. She has numerous articles in reputed journals to her credit and is currently working on the issues around a declining child sex ratio, sex selection, gender policy, and governance. Dr. Nanda is the general editor of Shakti Books, a series on writings on gender issues by her Anand Publications. She is a recipient of the ICSSR Doctoral Fellowship and the Delhi University Vice Chancellor's Teachers Excellence Award in 2017. Over to you, Dr. Nanda.
Thank you, Nilakshi, for that introduction. Very generous of you. I hope you can hear me. Am I clear? Yes? Yes. Okay. So I mean, there are the way in which the Baha'i has looked at this particular issue and the way in which they have divided the various elements of looking at the family is very significant, especially today, because the pandemic also has been a great leveler and a revealer. It has revealed to us the significance of the family, because in the lockdown, many members who were living separately for various reasons, it could be education, it could be employment, started working within the home. And then the other reason is that a number of family members lost their employment, and they had to lean on their family members in order to continue with their lives. So the importance of the significance of family emerges. The other area in which it has emerged has been in the area of caregiving, especially because the COVID resulted in a form of isolation from other people around you. The family became a very important caregiver. If you were not in hospital care, you were in home care, and that resulted in, relooking or re-envisioning the family. And I think it's important. My area of work has been looking at planning, how family planning is done in terms of choices regarded to fertility. And one of the reasons why I feel close to understanding the family has been to examine the idea of daughter aversion. Daughter aversion, or son preference, as it is popularly known, has resulted in families in India choosing to have sons instead of daughters. While it seems like a very benign choice, it is very clear that this choice is mediated on the basis of getting rid of girl children, and right before even they are born. So you look at a declining child sex ratio, and here the government of India has been trying or has been striving for gender equality. You have a very syncretic, very comprehensive flagship program of the Prime Minister of India called the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao campaign, which has delivered certain kind of dividends. However, the responsibility of bringing about gender equality right at the beginning, when you are born, lies with the family, the choices that they make. And therefore, I think for me, the family becomes significant when it comes to fertility choices. So exercising fertility choices right at that particular point of time, when you are choosing to have a family, what kind of a family, what are the kind of choices you make, that is premised on the number of women who are born in a country. And we become, if you take a look at the declining child sex ratio in India, we only have the 2011 census. We are looking at 0 to 6 age group. We are looking at 918 or 919 girls per 1,000 boys in the 0 to 6 age group. We also look beyond that at girl child neglect. We take a look very clearly at child marriages, that we are looking at what is known as violence against women and girls. And also women, and when we look at violence against women and girls, you're looking at a life cycle approach. So when you look at so many obstacles, all these obstacles are emerging in the most important social unit of our lives, which is the family. It is from the family that we expect love, we expect equality, and we receive. We cannot say that the family, we need to complicate that institution. We cannot say it is all bad, because it is in the family that you receive care, you receive support. It is also the family in which you bargain and negotiate for certain choices. It is your fallback in every sense of the term. And it is an area which enables some kind of safe space. But how can it be an enabling equal space is what I would be discussing here. I'll be focusing mainly on what is the role of decision making in this. So the first decision making that I recognize within the construct of the family is the decision to have children. How many children? And what is the kind of choice you make when it comes to the determination of the sex of the child. And very clearly, the laws in India do not allow you to determine the sex of the fetus or the sex of the child. However, families go ahead, and there is illegal and unethical medical practices which results in family choosing to have the son and not a daughter. And this is where I think we need to engage with the family, need to find out why this kind of a son preference or daughter aversion exists, and what can we do to change that. And in that, of course, there are ways of valuing the girl child, there are ways of celebrating the girl child, and all of us will agree that the girl child herself has proved herself in so many ways as being worthy or being equal in every sense of the term. But however, the onus of the responsibility of proving herself as an equal should not lie with the girl child, because they have equal rights, a right to life, a right to dignity, a right to equality. These are equal rights that every girl child should be given, along with every boy child in the family. So this understanding, or any other gender for that matter, because now there is a recognition of the third gender. So understanding how equality has to be premised within the family when it comes to fertility choices, how families, and these are families which are not necessarily rural based, they are urban families, they are rich families, they are educated families. So where is the contradiction or the paradox here that needs to be seen? When I am taking a look, I have given you an understanding coming from the census. I take a look at the understanding that is appearing from the NFHS data, the round 5 that has come in, and you take a look at decision making in the family. And therein you see that there has been some very positive changes. Bihar, for example, there has been an improvement in decision making for women. But there are also some adverse, and of course, decision making for women in the northeastern regions, especially in Nagaland and in Manipur, it is much better compared to the rest of India. However, there are other areas in which if you take a close look at it, when it comes to ownership of land, ownership of property, when it comes to decisions about health, all of that seems to be decreasing. And of course, workforce participation, we are all aware of, has decreased in every sense. So we do see certain positive impact of the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, a certain turnaround in sex ratio, so to say, in certain parts of Haryana and other parts where the campaign has been very effective. But you also see decrease in certain parts which were unexpected. You see it in Odisha, you see it in West Bengal, you see it in Assam. You see certain changes happening in certain parts of India where essentially they were not son preference societies. So what are these decisions that the family is taking? While we continue to talk about the government, we continue to talk about the civil society, the family as a unit exists within what is known as the private unit. So this idea of the family as private and not to be questioned, irrespective of the women's movement having fought let's say a battle from the 1980s onwards to bring decisions of the family within the ambit of lawmaking, within the ambit of progressive legislation, the family remains insular to it. So how do you bring in the family? What are the ways in which you bring in the family and you negotiate with them, you question them, you confront them, yet you do it in a manner in which you are able to bring about a readiness, a social readiness for attitudinal changes? Because a family is not a homogeneous unit. There are families, different kinds of families all over the country, and there are so many diversities depending on the region that you are in, or the caste, community, and other ways. But however, universally you will see declining child sex ratio. So they are in some sense negatively united when it comes to son preference. And this is if you take a look at the census report, you will find it everywhere. Any class, any community, you will find it. So what is it that makes family decide for daughter aversion is something that we need to open that box, and we need to engage on that count. And that particular decision making is something that needs to be engaged with. So therein I see that bringing in, having women, giving women better choices when it comes to, let's say, decision making processes, empowering women so that they can take those decisions may help us in the long run. This is not to say that women do not have active agency. Women do have active agencies and they do make choices about even having sons. However, are these empowered, and are these choices informed and empowered? So looking at informed and empowered choices when it comes to planning gender is something that needs to be examined in the context of decision making. That is the first box that I open when it comes to decision making. And thereby, once you make that, then you are going to be looking at you're going to be looking at various kinds of concerns, let's say within property rights. And when you take a look at the next, when I move on from declining child sex ratio, the next box that you reopen is how asset ownership can be improved. Now, when you take a look at the various rights that exist in India, whether you look at legislations, you do know that women, especially by the Hindu Succession Act of 2005, there has been improvement. They have co-partners' rights. They have almost the same rights as sons in the family. However, property rights continue to be denied to women. The reason being it is of a social conditioning, and it also overlaps with dowry. So how do you engage again? And dowry now has fallen out or has become unfashionable to be discussed by women's movements or by any one of us, because it seems it is over, but it is not. Huge spending on weddings and dowry continue to overlap with denying women the right to property. While women have the right to property, it is common practice for women to write off their properties to their brothers, stating it as a reason that this is about buying love. So if they want to be loved within their natal family, they should not have a dispute with their brothers. While two brothers can fight over property, a woman is denied that particular right even to fight with her brothers for that property. So that is denied to her. So the right to property becomes another part of the larger context of decision making that needs to be examined. The third examination has to do with the right to education. And of course, in India, we have progressed very well, especially when it comes to primary education. We have progressed very well. The gender enrollment ratio has improved considerably. The improvement has also happened due to the fact that we have had an emphasis on public toilets, on menstrual hygiene and the rest of it, which is associated and was recognized earlier, the denial of which was recognized earlier as obstacles in the path of girls going to school. So that has improved, although there might be certain areas where much improvement is required, but gender enrollment ratios have improved. So how do you then bring in that particular connection with higher education? There are more women in higher education. They're all excelling. They're excelling in sports. We all see that. They bring us great accolades. But that is just the tip of the iceberg, the winners. But those who are not the so-called winners, they need to be given that access. So how do you look at that access? How do you bring about greater access to education, especially looking at the digital divide? Women, and in fact, the NFHS last round shows that women, 20% of women, there is an increase in them having access to digital resources and to smartphones. But that needs to be improved. I teach as well as I'm at the head of a women's college, and the digital divide is something that always concerns us. How to bring in greater inclusion and diversity in that field? How to bring about greater accessibility when it comes to the use of digital resources? How women are denied that. So if there is a boy or a girl in the family, the boy will be given the access to the digital resource and the girl won't be, because the boy is seen as the preferred kind of a person when it comes to as an asset, and the girl is seen more as a liability. So that kind of a mindset, irrespective of change in legislation, irrespective of government focus on women, irrespective of all of that, that continues. So that is a decision that families have to make, and that decision cannot come in until there is social readiness, unless families are involved in a consultative process to recognize what are the barriers for that. So I see dowry coming in as a barrier. The other barrier that comes in is a social attitude that has to do with caregiving. And women are generally seen as caregivers, which is all right. And women do it. Some of them do it out of choice. Some of them do it out of conditioning. But bringing about greater equality when it comes to household care, when it comes to parenting, co-parenting. I have women who tell me that, co-parenting is just a nomenclature. And mostly all women are single parents, because it is they who ultimately end up taking care of children when it comes to nurturing and nourishing them. So how do you bring about greater co-parenting? Maybe in 2%, 3%, you do see an improvement. However, it is not across the board. So how do you bring about greater co-parenting? The other part of greater co-parenting is to go back to a certain cultural Asian values, which has to do with caregiving, where elders were part of the larger household. So the nuclearization of family based on a so-called progressive modernizing norm, that hasn't really resulted in greater caregiving or greater autonomy for women. So therefore, bringing about a more equal, yet at the same time, a greater family ties where you have larger, family groups to fall back on, whether it is elderly women in the family who became brought in more wisdom and were able to share that wisdom together, that could be looked at. So it is not necessarily that the mother-in-law is always the enemy of the daughter-in-law. So there are ways in which that can be engaged with and has been found to be useful. How do you re-engage with some of the so-called, Indian or Asian values of caregiving? How do you go back to that? What are the ways we can engage with that? So that could be another. The other would be to look at self-reliance and autonomy. So when it comes to decision-making within a family, the larger self-caring and autonomy, there is an autonomous decision-making processes where we say that everybody should be individualized, they should take their decisions on their own, or there is a syncretic decision-making process where we all do it together and we come to a certain understanding of what those decisions are. So bringing about equality within that process through syncretic understanding of who we are, what are we, what are the kind of decisions we take. That could be one area of exploration that we need to do. There is an understanding that comes in from feminist scholars like Nancy Chodorow, John Elstein and others. Chodorow says that when you bring up children, you need to see to it that the values of mothering is provided to both boys and girls. Or for that matter, if I can say, across the gender spectrum. So across the gender spectrum, if we are able to bring about mothering as a value, so it is all about, even about environmental care or any of that. So bringing about empathy, care, equanimity, sensitivity, compassion, these could all be the values that all of us could hold in common. So right from the outset, if that is the way in which we are educated, that could be one. Then I think, I do not know how much time I have, so I'll try to wrap up right now so that the other speakers can speak. So, so when you come to an understanding of compassion and those kind of values, I think it's important that while we look at autonomous decision making, we also look at certain values of caregiving, which can be in the environment of the family. They could be taught by the way you practice it. So taking care of elders is a good value. There is no need for us to recognize or see autonomy as separate from that, but that could be done in common. I mean, both parents could take care of elders. It should not be just the responsibility or the duty of the woman. So how can it be divided? And young children could be a part of that process, learning from each other. So finding time for leisure, for pleasure, for support, all of that should be part of the larger understanding of family. And like I said, there are different kinds of families. So if one studied, even for that matter, certain tribal families, in the way in which they took decisions in common, in the way in which the whole village is part of the larger family, how communities come together. So looking at communitarian understandings of how families have functioned traditionally may also provide us certain understanding of how equanimity, empathy can be brought in. So just having modernizing small family norms has not delivered on the point of equality. So the modernizing small family norm needs to be negotiated again with bringing about certain Asian values, which are about caring, about loving, and certain syncretic spiritual values. And that's why I think the Baha'i office is engaging with this. So looking at equanimity or empathy or love, for that matter, a love which is not negotiated, which is not utilitarian, but about humanity. If that can be taught, if a child is taught to take care of everyone, including a plant or an animal, and these are very simple ideas, but how can it be taught in common? The politics of mothering, or the reproduction of mothering that Nancy Chodorow talked about, is something that we could bring back in. So while the masculinist sense of justice is associated with rationality, with justice and the rest of it, with the right and wrong, the feminist ethics of care did engage with that. However, this is not to essentialize mothering. So mothering can be taught also to men and boys, and they should be engaged with the idea of care. And instead of having this idea of a very strong masculine protector, one could all have, caring. I mean, for that matter, Mahatma Gandhi was a caring human being, and he did not have any so-called masculinist stamp on him. So what is it that endeared him to us was the fact that he had this love for common humanity. So bringing in those values into the family, seeing people as equal, that could be ways of looking at some of these concepts. So therefore, it's very, very important that we look at family as a unit, which is the unit that educates us right from the beginning, and it is a unit that requires a lot of attention from all of us, and within the concept of Asian values, within the concept of humanitarian values, it exists. So this is the feminist concept. The other idea that I have found worthwhile to explore is the idea provided by Anthony Giddens, which is about the democracy of emotions. So Giddens makes a point about the fact that if you are living in a democratic democratic country and you want your children to learn about democracy, it is at the level of the family that these decisions should be taken. So even a young child, and since India is a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of Children, and we also have that very important deliberation on POSCO, and we are looking at prevention of child sexual abuse, how do you see the child as a person? How they can participate in decision making? What are those equal decisions to be made? So right from the beginning, irrespective of gender, irrespective of age, irrespective, so looking at that various intersectionality. But that way, those various intersectionality, even when it comes to class, can also be re-examined as to how you treat your domestic help within the house, how the family can become a non-hierarchical unit also has to do with how every unit within that family is treated. So Anthony Giddens does make a point about democracy of emotions, where decision making can be taken in common as equal and compassionate beings. So keeping all of this in mind and taking the importance of the family, especially in today's present times when pandemics will become the order of the day and when health-seeking behavior will require us to fall back on family, equality, equanimity, and empathy within the family may result in a more empathetic, more equal, and a more empowered country. So I end my discussion here. Thank you so much, Nilakshi, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Nanda, for beautifully, highlighting many important points here. There are some questions for you, but we will take it after Dr. Christopher's presentation. But yeah, I think it's very important to look at this whole area of decision making, like you have rightly pointed out. When it comes to decisions, they prefer boys than the girls when it comes to the decision of property or education. So I think that's the reason that the whole area of consultation, which we have highlighted in the concept note, is also very important to look at, like how consultations can be, a basis for decision making, like how who takes the decisions in the family. It's the man usually who decides on behalf of his family. And but every members in the family has their certain rights and responsibilities. So how would this process look like when it, when the decision comes on basis of a consultation? So this is something that we would like to explore more, and we'll come back to you, Dr. Nanda, with questions. But I would like to invite the next speaker, Dr. Christopher Baskeran. He is the Associate Director, Faith and Development of World Vision India. He has over 29 years of professional experiences in humanitarian services in India and has extended services across the Asia-Pacific region. He has engaged with faith leaders on child well-being at national level, church councils, and interfaith alliances, and multilateral agencies equip faith leaders on faith-inspired approaches and models that address the root causes of poverty and empower faith leaders and communities to contribute towards transformational change processes leading to child well-being that are consistent with World Vision's faith perspectives and ethos. Over to you, Dr. Christopher.
Thank you, Nilakshi. Friends, it's my privilege to participate in this symposium titled as Seedbeds for Change, Re-conceptualizing the family as a space for fostering equality of sexes. And it's such a wonderful moment for me to be part of this conversation with all of you. And also I'm thankful to Dr. Bijayalaxmi for that very comprehensive and elaborate and very in-depth understanding, providing us the landscape in which that we are currently working on, especially with related to the declining sex ratio. This also makes my presentation a little simpler because I also see that as an overarching issue that we are seeing this over the past 4 decades, that we see a constant decline in the sex ratio. for at the national level. So I would like to put up a presentation, if I'm allowed to make my presentation. I have a short. Is that okay?
Yes, you can share it.
Can I? Yes. I suppose this is visible. Okay. Is the presentation visible?
No.
No?
We can't see it, Dr. Christopher.
Yeah. Just a moment, I think it's taking some time. I don't know whether it's the internet bandwidth is low, but anyway, since if you can hear my voice, let me go ahead. Let me just stop sharing. Is it?
The
Yeah.
screen is not visible.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's visible now, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So the way that I'm putting up my presentation is to look at the context, the declining trend in child sex ratio as an indicator for gender inequalities, and looking at the socio-cultural issues that surround a declining trend, and also look at the possible solutions that are viable solutions, that how development agencies are involving themselves in providing a scope for families to come out of this vicious cycle of looking at these inequalities among or gender differences that we are seeing. If you look at the sex ratio, that we see that it is obviously it is declining. If you look at it, this is the published census reports that are coming to us over the past 4 decades. That if you observe, you see that in 1981 it was 962 girls per 1,000 boys below 7 years of age, and then every decade you see that it is slightly falling down. In 91 you see it as 945, in 2001 927 girls, and in 2011 it is 914. I do not know, and it would be very interesting to see the 2021 census report to see how the child sex ratio is in maybe a few months from now, that you'll be able to see that maybe in 2022. And India publishes the child sex ratio, but India does not publish the sex ratio at birth. But that would also be very interesting to see if it is published, to see how many live births, and also look at the differences between stillbirths, and so those are some dynamics that we would also like to know. But though these are recorded, but sometimes these are not available, or it is not published by the government. But we see that it is obviously that there is a declining trend at the national level. But when you look at sex ratios at the state level, you can see a wide variation, state and district level. You would see that some states and districts are performing really good, really well. Especially some in the southern states and in the northeast. But again, you would see that in the southern as well as in the northeastern states, that some of them are not performing well. By and large, you would also find that states that are very rich, states that are economically well off, are also poor performers and they show a very declining, or the disparity is very, very much that you could see that there is a very stark disparity between. There is a gender inequality is there, especially if you look at states in Haryana, Punjab, and also union territories, Delhi and Chandigarh, you find that there is a problem. And these are not states that are less educated, or states that are less wealthy, but you find that there is a declining trend in these, or you find that it's sex ratios are skewed. But there is the issue, as Dr. Bijayalaxmi pointed out, that there is the preference for boys, and this is all pervasive across India and also in the South Asia context, that you find that there is a preference for boys, which is mostly a cultural issue, a socio-cultural issue, and also that is connected with the way that children are nurtured within families, and the families, their preferences, be it a small family or a large family, be it agrarian, or even families that are in urban or they are well educated, there is a very strong preference for boys, which means that there are sex selections which is widely prevalent, though it is legally prohibited, but still you find feticides related to sex selections. And there is also a problem of infanticide, and mostly girl child not surviving is also there. We have children who would die of starvation and hunger every day. That number is mostly about 4,000 children every day would die of starvation and hunger in India. And if you would find that a large number would be mostly the girl child, and girl children accessing healthcare would be less than the boys accessing healthcare. Child abuse is another issue that we see that both boys and girls are equally abused, that we find that, and abuse of girl child, abuse a girl child with disabilities more vulnerable, and you find that all of these are perpetuated towards the girl child is very high. Rape of minors, that is also very widely prevalent. Child marriages is also widely practiced and is also prevalent in India, though there are laws which prevent child marriages, but still we have this as practices, and they have a very strong cultural practice of child marriages, especially in some of these states. It's still practiced. And early forced marriages, even before a girl is 18, she's married off, and the moment she's 18, she's still forced to get married. Even before she reaches 21, she is forced to get married, not of her choice, but it is mostly the choice is made by someone else. And so there are forced marriages, and there are issues of dowry that surround these things. Child trafficking related to which could have many things that relate to poverty. There are trafficking which is taking place, of even cross-border trafficking into India, and in some of the very impoverished districts, you would find that there is a high number of children who are being trafficked for domestic help or even for sex trafficking. Exploitation, child labor is also another issue that we are seeing. Neglect of children, especially the girl child, is also very common, and all forms of violence faced by children. And these are all socio-cultural factors, which is also closely associated with the declining child sex ratios. And apart from these, that there are also that what you would find to be as femicide or honor killing of female children or even adults related to safeguarding the honor within the families. So these are also issues that surround the issues connected to a declining trend in the child sex ratio. But there are some good examples where you would find at the district level that there are improvements that we are able to see over these years, to see that the of equalizing trend in the child sex ratios. The way that NGOs, especially World Vision, is looking at it is to look at families as a whole and to understand, how children can be nurtured within families, where differences or issues related to gender could be addressed within families. So when World Vision started, World Vision is a child-focused organization, and as part of our exercises of listening to children, when we were asking about children about what does it mean that children would understand about well-being of children. World Vision looks at well-being of children from 4 dimensions. One is the physical well-being, that children grow healthy and physically, and the second dimension is that children have they grow intellectually, that they have the enough nourishment and the input that children would grow intellectually well. And the third dimension that we look at it is from the social dimension, where children are protected and they are cared for by families as well as in the communities where they live, and there are safe, the communities are also safe spaces for children for them. And the fourth dimension is that children grow, are loved by their families, their communities, and as well as they have, it also looks into their spirituality, that they have the understanding that they are loved by God, that there is, that the child is also spiritually growing along with their families. The family also imparts the spirituality of their family in which environment that they live in. So when we asked that, when we had this exercise with children, what do they perceive as well-being of children? So one of the responses that the child had was, can you please teach our parents to put us back in their hearts? Could you teach our parents to put us back in their hearts? It's something that can we be loved by our parents? A simple quest that children have is to be loved and to love others. And so this exercise also looked at it, and this was quite it was repeatedly coming from many quarters that we were looking at. The children were asking for something that was that, yes, we need this, the idea of being loved by parents as well as people in the communities. And then we also looked at asking parents as to what they meant about looking at well-being of children. So when we were asking parents, the one thing that kept repeatedly coming back was, can you teach us how to raise children or nurture children properly and to care for them? So out of this exercise came about what we called it as celebrating families. How can families celebrate? How can children celebrate families together? And what does that mean for children to come together? And so out of this, we found that we came up with the framework where families could understand their own brokenness um, at a particular point in time, and lack of forgiveness and lack of grace within families. We are going through these difficulties. We do not have these resources. We do not have all of these, but we have the relationships are strained, are broken. And how can we understand each other and forgive one another? So the journey of a happy family or a life that is full or life that is filled with a kind of grace and love that abounds within families. Families were starting to recognize seeds of goodness within them. So we developed activities based on so how that they would be able to recognize seeds of goodness among each other within families. So parents could recognize seeds of goodness in their children. Children can recognize seeds of goodness in their parents, and between siblings. So all of that evolved around activities that we were building up for them. And then reasons for Thanksgiving. So what are those things that I can be thankful for, that I'm enjoying around within my space, within my family space? And space for love, loving each other, and grace. It's something that I do not deserve, but I am blessed with. Opportunities for forgiveness. Am I forgiving? Am I appreciating? Am I forgiving? So these are things, that values that were emerging or based on activities that parents could do this for children. And the journey is towards a fullness of life where they would experience wholeness, that they would a sense of being complete, of blessing one another. And though these are also practiced within the families, is it a right that we do, or do we really bless each other from our hearts? So in this process, the families begin to address their past issues that they have gone through, difficulties, and then recognize the present realities that they are living in, and also envision a future that is brighter, in which that they would like to plan and go ahead. And then also their dreams of the families, and how that they would be able to pursue their dreams together. And this is how the framework of celebrating families was developed. And so we have these as a workshop for parents and children together in the communities where we do our development work. And then we follow them up over a period of time to see the progress that each of these families who have attended these workshops are journeying across. So addressing the past looks at my hope, my dreams for the family. That's a more an introductory part that they would do, and also recognize their memorable childhood experiences that each of them, the adults, the parents, could also experience, and revisit their most memorable times that they have. And then they begin to understand signs of wholeness as well as signs of brokenness within them and in their families, and begin to articulate appreciate the goodness in them. So it is not about critiquing one another, but it is about appreciating one another and finding seeds of goodness in each other. The second part of the celebrating families looks into the present realities of what are the joys, the pains, the recent difficulties that they are going through, and also is there space for love and grace within the families, and also looking at reasons for Thanksgiving and opportunities that we would be able to forgive each other. And looking for the future is about defining moments. What are the defining moments within the families? We look at the timelines that these families have progressed over these years, and look at how can we build the families as wise builders, as what are those key building blocks that we would be able to discover and build on. Though we know that building a house is building a structure, but building a family requires people, relationships, and coming together. So what are those building blocks that the family really values to build this family up over a period of time? And then determining their steps at each and every moment that they would be able to build over a period of time. And then is the pursuing their dreams, and then how that they articulate their vision, and it is in front of them, that they really put it up in their homes and bless each other by speaking words of grace and love towards each other. So this is the whole picture of the celebrating families, that we get families to journey together. And in this process, families begin to understand the value of the girl child. In many families, that they begin to understand what it means to be nurturing children equally, and understand about their preferences, and what are those things that they would be able to do for one another, and how men and women can participate together within the families. Along with this, we also have a men care model that is mostly focused on building or reiterating or reconstructing the masculinities of men. So the goal is to promote men's involvement as equitable partners, as non-violent fathers and caregivers, in order to achieve a gender equality and positive family well-being. So this one is actually a fatherhood campaign of helping fathers to understand their roles and responsibilities, and engaging men and boys to reduce and prevent gender-based violence. One aspect of bridging gender inequalities is to empower women and to equip women into understanding their roles and responsibilities, and then how that they will be able to build them with confidence and involve them in the development process. It is also important for men to understand their role and how that they would be able to participate and bring down this gender-based violence, and encourage the active involvement of men and boys in elimination of gender stereotyping. So this is also very important for men and boys to eliminate gender stereotyping. And also feature this campaign was the recognition that men must be partners in prevention and agents of change. So this men become active agents of change within the process. And there is also the formation of fathers groups to improve men's understanding of how gender inequalities impacts relationships between men and women. In the last
Dr. Christopher, if you can just conclude.
My time is over. Is my time?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, Dr. Christopher.
Is my time over?
Yes.
Okay.
If you can finish, then
Thank you. Thanks. So this fathers group actually helps people to work and understand masculinities and promote gender differences, and also help them to address issues within families. Yeah. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher.
Yes, thank you.
For this presentation and giving us more information about and sharing the data of the child sex ratio. Thank you so much. But you also highlighted some very important point, like you said that the family as a space, we can see how children can be nurtured. And also you raised a question of trusteeship, like the society, how society can be more conscious about the development of children. We can take a few questions. One question is addressed to Dr. Nanda. Dr. Nanda, would you like to respond to this question? How can we bring change in our family level from childhood? How can we bring the concept of equality between men and women into our family to remove the barriers which you mentioned?
You want me to take the question now? Is
yes,
that what?
Maybe we can take a few questions. Yes. And then we go to the next presentation.
That's a very important question, and I think in Dr. Christopher Baskeran's presentation, he did mention a few very interesting initiatives involving men and boys, and encouraging them towards to be equal partners, especially in fathering or caregiving. I think those are important kind of initiatives. However, when it comes to my understanding of how we could do it, of course, every family is poised differently because of class, caste, community, so many other kind of constraints. And there are families which are not necessarily in the construct as you and I understand it. There are families of choices. There are families which are forced to be together. There are many such families. However, all one can do if one is a parent is to teach equality right from childhood. And if one is being coerced or is being imposed upon, then the ability to say no and the ability to do so through a process which is not necessarily confrontationist, but is based on an understanding of cooperative decision making. How do you bring that about? What are the ways in which you challenge and yet you do not become confrontationist? Those are the kind of mediation skills that one needs to learn. I would say Gandhi has taught us that very well. Ahimsa, the art of non-violence, the art of protesting, but without bloodshed, and yet even seeing the one who is opposing us as being equal to us, and also being able to love them. These are all values which are part of a larger understanding of humanity. So how can we improve on that? That could be one way. The other way is to bring about an awareness of laws that exist in our country. Look at the various schemes that exist in our country, which are towards equality. So how can we engage with those laws? Unless we have an understanding of it, we will not be able to do so. I personally feel, and I have heard from students, that they have found it best. They have been able to mediate best when they are aware of their rights. And they're also not only aware of their rights, they're aware of their responsibilities. So the moment they become aware of their rights, they become aware of their responsibilities. So understanding rights and responsibilities go together is very, very important for us. It is relevant to us as individuals, also as members who belong to certain communities. So rights have to be mediated through responsibilities. I have written along with the co-author Nupur Roy on a concept known as reflective autonomy. Reflective autonomy refers to understanding that we are autonomous and we must take certain decisions which are for us. However, that cannot be a reactive autonomy. That cannot be premised only on the fact that, yes, I have this right and therefore I need it. That is not how you mediate it. You reflect upon various things. And there are three things that we have talked about reflection. Number one, engagement. What is your engagement with that issue? How have you engaged? Is it about equality in terms of access to resources? Is it about equality and equal, entitlements? That engagement is important. Then you look at emancipation. Who is going to get improved in that situation? And therein you look at the one who is worst affected. That is important. So emancipation, and then empathy. You put yourself, it is not based on an understanding of sympathy, but empathy, feeling for the other. So the more equal marriages we have, the more, choice-based understandings we have, which is through reflective autonomy, not separated from the idea of reflective autonomy. So not through a market-based understanding or an individualized liberal understanding. Liberal understanding is fine, but not an individualistic perspective, but a reflective perspective based on welfare, on well-being, all those concepts. I think Dr. Baskeran has put that very well. So how can you bring about reflective autonomy? And for that, to be aware of your rights, to be aware of your responsibilities is very important, to be yourself sensitive. And herein comes the concept of restorative justice. So we cannot always look for punitive justice. That, if it is a case of, let's say, rape, while we must bring about stringent punishment and we should try to prevent it, but an eye for an eye, like Gandhi says, makes the world blind. So how do you negotiate with that from the point of view of restorative justice? More on reforms, more on prevention, more not so much within the concept, let's say, how do you bring about reconciliations? How do you bring about forgiveness? And there's this very beautiful film made by this director called Swati Chakravarti, called Rubaru Roshni, which talks about forgiveness and talks about how people whose parents have been killed and have met their perpetrators and forgiven them. So how do you bring about, it is a human feeling, how do you bring that about? So this idea of reconciliation, restorative justice, the idea of apology, very clearly written in Eve Ensler's book, where she writes a letter from her father who had sexually abused her, and writes about how her father is writing to her to forgive her. So, this idea that a perpetrator who belongs to the family can be forgiven. So how do you not question the institution, but find grace and forgiveness? I think Dr. Baskeran has talked about it, and I completely agree with the idea of restorative justice, reflective autonomy. I think that is where equality, and also being aware of your rights. You cannot negotiate for anything unless you are aware of your rights. So I hope that explains.
Thank you, Dr. Nanda. Dr. Christopher, there is a question for you. Would you like to respond to that?
Yes. I think the question is about strong cultural practices in child marriages, and also about how do we overcome this challenge. One way that we are looking at it is to also equip faith leaders. Many of them are involved in the performing the rites of for child marriages, solemnizing these weddings. So we are using some models that will work with faith leaders. There is a model that we use that is called as Channels of Hope for Child Protection, which sensitizes and equips faith leaders on issues that address children. And we also listen to faith leaders and their role in these issues, that how that they would be able to work, because they work very closely with the families, and families are very strongly associated with these faith leaders. So we work across all faith leaders and help them to work. But there are also problems that the faith leaders face, because some of these are very strong cultural practices. What we hear from faith leaders is that the families have already decided, and we are just roped in at the last moment, and we are just called to come in and solemnize these weddings. But now, after going through these sensitizations, faith leaders are clearly able to say no to these things, that they will not be part of this, and they will not solemnize these kinds of weddings or make these arrangements. And many of them now ask for birth certificates or age of proof before they do solemnize weddings. And they also encourage parents and help them to understand what it means for children, how that they would be able to postpone these weddings at a much later date. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher. Maybe we can move on to the next presentation. I'd like to invite now Mrs. Sheela Kakde. She is the president of All India Women's Conference, popularly known as AIWC. In her existence, 33-year-long journey with working with AIWC, she has worked in all facets of the organizations from the grassroots to the top. She has served in the many capacities at AIWC as a Secretary General from 2011 to 14, then Vice President from 14 to 17, and a member in charge of the Constitution at the AIWC. And she has also participated in many national and international conferences, and she has facilitated and organized a series of webinars on Ode to the Glorious Past, presenting the glorious history of 94 years of existence of AIWC since its inception. Over to you, Sheela ji.
Yeah. Thank you, Nilakshi ji. Sahanavavatu, sahanau bhunaktu, sahaviryam karvavahai, tejasvinavaditamastu, ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Meaning, may we all be protected, nourished and energized. May we all work together with great energy. May our intellect be sharpened. Let there be no animosity amongst us. Peace in me, peace in nature, peace in divine forces. Namaskar on behalf of All India Women's Conference to all who have joined in today's webinar to discuss how to promote equality of the sexes in the society. I congratulate Nilakshi ji, Director of India Sector of Baha'is, for bringing this important topic of concern for discussion so that we can get practical ideas for implementation. Thank you, Nilakshi ji, for inviting AIWC to share our views and experiences and learn from distinguished speakers. The basic of all religions is all human beings are children of one God and are equal in the eyes of God. This is a key principle which should be taught from early age to the children. Swami Vivekananda warned, it is completely unfair to discriminate between sexes, as there is not any sex distinction in Atman, soul. The soul has neither sex nor caste nor imperfection. He suggested not to think in terms of men and women, but only that there are human beings. He felt the best thermometer to the progress of a nation is its treatment of its women, and it is impossible to get back India's lost pride and honor unless they try to better the condition of women. Vivekananda considered men and women as two wings of a bird, and it is not possible for a bird to fly on only one wing. So according to him, there is no chance for welfare of the world unless the condition of the women is improved. We are well aware that in the family only, the child learns very well defined gender role of male and female. We saw that in the presentations by our previous speakers also. Our inherent system associates women in this role play. The responsibility of children to be educated and nurtured, old and sick to be cared for, home to be kept tidy by small errands we can tell our children, like folding their bed sheets, lying the dining table, give the duty of giving medicines to the grandparents, giving water, milk, and do their work. These are the few things which can be taught or asked to do to the children. If from childhood, children are taught to do these works without discrimination, then they learn that and try to do it better than other siblings. I had done this in my house when my daughter and son were small. Both of them were brought up with equality, and it proved successful. Teach children to value and respect people based on their actions and thoughts. Every human being is gifted with different valuable quality, so respect that. As a family, this is our duty. The mindset of grandparents and parents have to change. This realization is seen in many families in the cities. In the villages also we see this. In the nuclear families where both the parents are working, the children help the parents in any work at home. Basically, I feel it is how you bring up the children because they are the future parents. Consultation as the basis for decision making. A certain shift in this is required from the authoritarian structure, taking unanimous decisions by breaking through the code of open communication flow between members, basis being respect and openness. These features inherently promote love, humility, and those wonderful qualities that will be merged into constructive decision making at the family unit and make it a path breaker. These decisions will be constructive in nature. Here I would like to share my own experience of childhood. We had a small unit of the family, my parents and me, the only child. My father always used to ask for my mother's and also my opinion or a choice before deciding a holiday destination or any purchases for the house or selection for gifts in the family functions, even when I was in school. He was very strict disciplinarian, punctual and regular in all his work, and never tolerated smallest lie, but democratic. The basic values of truth, nonviolence, love and humanity should be taught in the early childhood. I very strongly believe that truth and nonviolence are such virtues which are to be followed very strictly so that you can be fearless and enjoy happiness always. We have learned, as Dr. Bijayalaxmi also said, we have learned this from Gandhiji's lives. And we have achieved also independence with non-violence. All kinds of violence by action, behavior, by speech, and mind also should be curtailed from the younger days. Children learn by observation, and many times in the nuclear families, when both the parents are working, the small kids often observe wrong things, but learn things which they should not. Not only parents, but grandparents also have a major role to play in nurturing the family unit. All members of the family unit at all levels should be grateful to God, to the nature, to everybody around, because each one of us is here in this world because of all of them. We have forgotten to respect others and love them. Family as a basic unit requires to be looked and tackled to consolidate family as a unit. When young children, they see the parents, the grandparents thanking, giving their gratitude, they will also learn this and the picture will be different. The family as a basic unit requires to be looked and tackled to consolidate family as a unit. Society has to be placed as the unit in the total conjunction between society interests rate above family interests. Overcoming domestic violence, family and its members are most prone to susceptible to violence, physical, mental, verbal, abusive. This extends to all, especially women. Nothing can be condoned. No amount of familism or any other factors can justify violence. Laws are in place, human rights too. But this being an area dealing with hypersensitive issues, we can't subject it to such factors instead of setups and systems promoting love and respect for both genders. Way beyond tolerance is required. In December 2020, AIWC was invited by Parliamentary Standing Committee for recommendations on atrocities on women. The recommendations were appreciated and included in the report submitted to the PM office. At AIWC, we have a program designed for adolescent age group. This is a 3 to 5 days program and is taken up by branches to be conducted in schools for boys and girls. In this program, we teach life skills, behavioral pattern, essential values of life. These programs are conducted all throughout the country in our branches, numbering 500. At AIWC, we are running community college with IGNU, skill training of computer, textile block printing, fashion designing, tailoring and stitching, beautician course is being taught. Various programs are arranged for these students and we encourage these students' active participation also. Care is taken for overall development of a child. AIWC, with its glorious legacy of 94 years, has always worked for education, empowerment, and emancipation. AIWC's 18th president, Dr. Hansa Mehta, in 1945-46, the time when Hansaben was appointed as an Indian delegate to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. She found herself on the Commission of Human Rights of the United Nations, serving as the vice chair to Eleanor Roosevelt, one of the most accomplished first ladies of US. Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Fundamental Freedoms had Hansa Mehta's fingerprints all over, and this has marked as a significant resolution. In the United Nations, when it was said, all men are born free and equal, Hansa Mehta raised objection and said, all human beings are born free and equal. AIWC has gained consultative status of ECOSOC with the United Nations and other international bodies like International Alliance for Women, Pan-Pacific South Asian Women's Association, REN, Infose, etc. In the UN CSW parallel event in October 2020, AIWC participated in the deliberations on the topic Violence at Home and Beyond Women's Daily Lives in COVID. AIWC, with its vast network of branches numbering 500 plus all over India and membership around 1 lakh plus, at its own level, runs projects and programs implementing the Sustainable Development Goals. Regular creche programs are run in the branches. Many branches are running primary and secondary schools. AIWC also runs working women's hostels, short stay home for distressed women at Vrindavan and at head office. Besides this, 10 more branches also run this program along with Family Counseling Center for distressed women. National integration and communal harmony and peace are being offered as program in collaboration with NFCH. Other programs conducted are all kinds of health checkups, anemia programs, socio-economic programs for empowerment of women. Looking at the need of the hour, lot of awareness programs on gender sensitization, Save the Girl Child, sexual harassment, legal awareness, renewable energy, water and waste management, environment and climate change are conducted on virtual platform. Under Environment Protection Program, our branches take up tree plantation in rainy season. Recently, our South Zone A, comprising of Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Pondicherry states, have launched a program of Planet Abundantly Green with the help of Forest Department. AIWC campus at 6 Bhagwan Das Road has started with e-waste collection center and also maintains zero waste zone. For internal peace and happiness, we have had 3 sessions for the staff members on relationships management since 2020. During the pandemic, our branch members spread all over the country in approximately 500 branches, extended their helping hand towards the needy in form of food, medicines, sanitizers, oxygen cylinders, vaccination support, providing accommodation for medical doctors, paramedicals, even giving health care. AIWC branches have provided counseling to the mentally disturbed in this COVID situation also. We have launched a program through our branches to support the education of girls who have lost both the parents during COVID pandemic. This is just an overview of the activities of AIWC members. We members all voluntarily definitely work, each one of them definitely work for the family unit, for the society, and in turn for the country. AIWC strongly feels education, both formal and informal, is the only way to achieve our goal of love, humanity, peace, patience, and inner happiness. Thank you very much for patient hearing.
Thank you, Sheela ji. Thank you so much for your presentation and also sharing the experiences of your organization. Two important things which you have said, that when we look at this principle of the oneness of humanity, when we think that we all are one, and then the concept of soul, which has no gender, then the question again comes back to us, like how to create an environment in the family where these values can be inculcated in children. What will be the role of individuals, institutions, and community in this? Yeah, thank you for sharing, Sheela ji, for your insights. We will
to answer this question, Nilakshi ji, I would say formal and informal education is most important. We have to value what our spiritual leaders have taught us, what Vivekananda ji has told us, what our Bhagavad Gita is also teaching us, that we have to follow. And we have to teach our children right from the beginning. When we follow, the parents, the grandparents, they have a bigger role to bring up the generation. And when we follow it, our children will also follow it. It will definitely take longer time, but this is the way we are doing this through our organization throughout the country.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will go more on this during our question and answer session. I would like to invite now Ms. Rita Panicker. She's the founder, director of an organization called Butterflies India. It's a non-governmental organization. Ms. Panicker was a faculty at Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Prior to founding Butterflies, Ms. Panicker was invited by the Ministry of Women and Child, Government of India, to be part of the committee to draft the model guidelines for foster care in 2015. She was also commissioned by the ministry to develop a reader for parents, teachers, and communities to provide some advisory guidelines on how to prevent and protect children from coming in conflict with law. She has published several papers on child rights issues and co-authored studies on children and crime in India in 2017, Breaking the Silence, Violence Against Boys in India 2019, and Children of Violence 2021. Ms. Rita Panicker.
Thank you. I'd like to first take the opportunity to thank National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of India for organizing this webinar on reconceptualizing family as a space for fostering equality of sexes. I would also like to thank you, Nilakshi, for inviting me to share my thoughts on this very important subject. A lot has been spoken by the three speakers, and I hope I'm not going to be repeating any of them, but let's begin. There is no doubt that we need to strengthen, protect, and reimagine our families. The social institutions, socialization patterns, and human relations are changing with the avalanche of information and influence of technology in our lives. However, before we discuss this new dimension, we need to discuss and dialogue about family as an institution itself, its importance in our society as being the primary agency that gives us our roots, our history, a belonging, a name, values, and beliefs. Family is socially and culturally constructed. In India, our society is patriarchal, from which stem social norms, which becomes a basis for socialization. The values of patriarchy and notions of masculinity defines the roles and responsibilities of an individual, the power one has over the other. Sons are brought up to have freedom, be strong, courageous, and to be future household providers. The daughters are to be protected, her freedom restricted. She is socialized to believe her key responsibility is to be a homemaker. The division of labor in the household is based on these social norms, thereby decides the balance of power of all family members. This has inadvertently had an effect on how a boy child views himself and expectations from him, from the family, from the community, of the society itself. Butterflies did an empirical study on sexual abuse of boys and their perceptions of sexuality and masculinity in 2019. This research was part of a multi-country study in Asia. I must say that in 2007, the Government of India, Ministry of Women and Child Development did do a national study on sexual abuse of children. And it was interesting to note that 53% of the children who were interviewed were boys who said who had experienced sexual violence. It was 53%. And therefore, we got legislation, POCSO, which is gender neutral. But however, when it comes to services for boys who are sexually abused, it's very limited. So here, coming back to the study that Butterflies did, the boys expressed guilt and shame as they felt they were not brave enough to stop the perpetrator from committing the crime. The boys mentioned that their parents did not believe them at first and then admonished them for not fighting back. The boys articulated their notion of masculinity, the asli mard. Who is an asli mard? An asli mard is a person, is a boy who is as that of being brave, strong, to have the courage to fight, use violence to get what you want. It is this misplaced notion of what it is to be a man that pushes boys to demonstrate that they have power, even if it means to use violence. In our work with adolescent boys, they have mentioned there are times when they want to cry, but are unable to do it in front of others because they have to be brave and strong. Boys are equally vulnerable as girls. They too need to be given care and protection, just girls, given the space to express their pain, their sadness, to cry. It is important to socialize both boys and girls that it is not a weakness to cry, to show your emotions of pain. Let not this emotion be gendered to girls. Violence comes from this notion and socialization that boys and men have the right to use violence. It is a power. Men are seen, or rather recognized, as being brave, powerful, when they can exercise this power. All power and violence over another person may not always translate into physical violence. The use of psychological and emotional power over another being is even more damaging and threatening and the verbal and emotional abuse leaves that affected person feeling worthless, lack of self-esteem, and a psychological state where the person finds it to cope up with life itself so difficult and is in constant fear and denial. Therefore, when we speak about to democratize family, we need to begin in addressing some of these negative social norms that perpetuate the patriarchal values in our families and society. There is a need to have a paradigm shift in our values and attitude towards children and their being. Children have their agency, and we need to respect it. A family is the perfect social unit to educate and inculcate the value of democracy. The true spirit of democracy, what it is to be democratic. And family is a perfect social unit to educate this. Parents, and especially fathers, need to understand that by consulting, listening, helping out in family care does not undermine one's position in the family. Rather, it enhances it. It translates into positive bonding among all members, mutual respect to recognize, accept a different point of view. This also translates into a deeper love, caring, and support within the family. Most men believe their primary and sole responsibility is to be the household provider of the family. This is how they are socialized right from childhood. Whereas being a homemaker is a feminine role and responsibility. Men actually lose out in the process of caring and bringing up their children. This is such a beautiful experience of caring, protecting, and teaching your child about the meaning of life itself. I like to give you an illustration here, a very poignant one. Butterflies runs childline services in 2 districts in Delhi, in South and Southeast, as well as in Nizamuddin railway station. Some years ago, we used to get a phone call every day at 3 p.m. from a 10-year-old boy from an upper middle class family. He would ask to speak to one of our team female member, and if she was not there, he would disconnect. The boy would call to have a conversation with the social worker about what he did in school, about his day, all about his friends, what they played, what they shared, what he learned. The boy was lonely. When asked, why does he not share these beautiful experiences with his parents? He said they have no time. He mentioned his father does not know him. He does not know what goes on in his mind and in his heart, what I like and I don't like. He doesn't know my dreams. And the boy said, neither does he really know his father. We then had sessions with the parents, and it brought about a positive change in the relationship between the father and son and the husband and wife. The 10-year-old called the social worker a couple of months later and mentioned to her that he would not be calling her every day, as now his parents spend a lot of time with him. In our work with parents and families, we have realized the importance of positive bonding in a family. How do you do it? There are various ways of doing it. One of it is by having meals together, having informal conversations with each other, fathers sharing about their day, mothers speaking about her day, and so also the children just generally talking about what happened to them during the day. Women asking their husband and son to help in doing a task at home as a routine. Fathers helping out in the studies of their children, taking them out to play for an outing, and also looking after a child or a family member when he or she is sick or hurt. That's is something that a father can do and should be doing. It's not just a prerogative of the mother, the woman. And you would learn so much by doing that. The power to decide on major issues in the family rests with the man, that is the husband or the father. How do we change that? In our work with parents and families, we have had sessions with families on household budgeting. This was a very good tool we found for changing the power dynamics in a family. Control over money is power. We observed that when the wife had a say, as well as the children, on what to spend on, how much to save, there was harmony in the family. Children realized their parents' hard work brought in an X amount of resources, which need to be judiciously spent for the benefit of all. The change in power equations in the family is not easy. It is a process that needs time, but also in unlearning one's values, beliefs, attitudes that one has been socialized with, of the prevailing dominant social norms. Members of the family find it difficult to have an ethos in the family where decision-making is a democratic process, where discussions take place, there's a dialogue, negotiations, disagreements, and positive conflict resolutions. In our work with children and families, we have used different techniques, including family therapeutic care interventions, to help in the process of positive family bonding. And I want to stress that family therapeutic care interventions is very, very important if we really want to bring about a change in family dynamics and bring about a positive bonding in family. We live in a country which is so rich in its diversity and plurality that we should be celebrating it. There is no other country in the world where there is such diversity of ethnicity, religion, language, culture as India. All the religions have a common thread of acceptance, love, compassion, and forgiveness. We need to emphasize this. Educate our children that our religion professes the same as the other. We are not different, but all of us together define humanity. By building walls around us with prejudices, fear of the other, we lose out the very meaning of humanity or spiritualism itself. It is important for us to understand the true meaning of spiritualism. By being spiritual, you become sensitive, compassionate, open to different ideas, accept each person for who they are, respect and give dignity to each person we interact with in our daily lives. Spirituality will help us to look beyond ourselves, I, me, and myself, to the notion of we, us, and to realize our actions will impact the lives of others. The value and importance of sharing should be part of socialization. To give something back to the community should be part of our lives. So also respect and giving dignity should be part of our value system. This would, in many ways, help in breaking down the prejudices and injustices we inflict on another person due to his or her class, religion, caste, language, and education. As part of life skills education, we can teach children how to handle emotions of frustration, disappointment, and anger management. How to positively resolve conflict without use of violence. This would, in the long run, prevent the culture of violence existing in our families and society. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that we need to democratize families where equality among boys and girls are the norm. Children's agency is respected, and parents have to reschool themselves in parenting skills, especially in today's world, to understand the challenge of technology and its influence on children. This is very important today, protecting them from harmful internet websites and teaching them how to use technology safely and not for harmful purposes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rita ji, for this thought-provoking presentation. You also mentioned about this spiritual principles that can be inculcated in children, which Sheela ji has also rightly mentioned in her presentation about the soul and the oneness of humanity. One thing which I could gather from your presentation, Rita ji, is that how to give more attention to the limiting conceptions of masculinity and femininity. Saying that boys, they don't want to show emotions in the world. That's how they are trained. They're not supposed to show emotions. They will be more. So I think that's another point that we need to look at. Thank you to all the esteemed speakers for sharing your insights for this webinar. I think if we look at each and every point that you shared today, we need a series. We can do a series of webinars to discuss each and every point and explore more about that. We can now take some questions. One of these questions is that addressed by one of our participants is about prejudices. It says one challenge with prejudices, such as the one that exists between the genders, is that for most people, they lie within the realm of invisibility. The majority of the people who propagate such prejudices are not tyrannical by nature, but lack consciousness, the lack of consciousness. So one question that this participants wants to hear is the views of the esteemed panelists is on how do we raise consciousness within entire populations without falling into the trap of creating oppressors and the oppressed, and what systems have to be put in place to support the education of populations that rather than drawing on guilt and shame can transform the human heart in a way that elevated consciousness guides action. And in this process of bringing equality, how do we make unity not only our final aim, but also our modus operandi? So can you just, maybe any of the speakers would like to respond to this question? Maybe Dr. Nanda, we can start with you, and then other panelists can also share.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear. Could you please repeat that? I'm sorry, I lost.
I'm so sorry. There is this question of prejudices. This is one of the participants had asked. It says that one challenge with prejudices, such as the one that exists between the genders, is that for most people, they lie within the realm of invisibility. The majority of the people who propagate such prejudices are not tyrannical by nature, but lack consciousness. So one question that the participants would like to hear from the esteemed panelists is how do we raise consciousness within entire populations without falling into the trap of creating oppression and the oppressed, and what systems that rather than drawing on guilt and shame can transform the human heart in a way that elevated consciousness guides action.
You want me to respond to that, Nilakshi?
Yes,
Or you want
yes.
I'll keep
Maybe
it
we
short.
can start with you.
Yes, I'll keep it short. When it comes to social conditioning and prejudices, we are all aware that it operates at a level which is within our consciousness. And in that, Hannah Arendt has written this very interesting book called The Banality of Evil, that the evil person that you see even in a Nazi regime is somebody who looks just like you and behaves just like you and is part of the system. So the prejudices and the kind of social, subconscious thoughts that we hold are created over a period of time, and it is created through families, through social media, through all that you are exposed to in terms of your learning and unlearning. It could also be educational institutions. It's largely there. But how do you then negotiate those thoughts? And that is possible, I think, only when family members and others make a conscious choice to tell you about right and wrong, about what is ethical and unethical. And it is through these practices, by practicing what you are preaching. And it is by engaging with that through educational, through tools like school books, like civil society initiatives. I think Rita Panicker's discussion was with in-depth analysis, where she said, how can you engage with your consciousness? So I think it's very important that we could do it one at a time. And you could just begin with ourselves. Every day, if you look within our own conversations, you will be dealing with a number of prejudices, and every day you will have to unlearn them. And that is possible by listening and learning, by imbibing, and the civil society and government organizations and educational institutions, as well as the media, has a responsibility to be very sensitive about not perpetuating or reinforcing stereotypes and prejudices, especially when it comes to gender, even through media, anything. I mean, a film can perhaps have far more greater effect than all the learning that we are doing here. So I remember there was this interesting film called Thappad, which raised questions about how domestic violence perpetuates within a home. And it seemed to have spread the message much better than years and years of working of civil society agencies. So how that message is carried on, what are the simpler ways? I mean, we recently lost Kamla Basheen, and her way of speaking was so accessible to our young students. The way she could spread that message, and she would just say, let's go, not with the love of power, but with the power of love. I think those are the messages which we are able to spread through music, through song, through creative medium. And I'm sure there is a storm and we remember only the storms. But the fact is there is a lot of calm in between storms. And if we can just capture what is it that keeps that calm, we will be able to bring about some kind of turning around of prejudices. A lot of prejudices have been challenged. And a lot of stereotypes have been, myths have been broken. And I congratulate the work that has been done by the people here in the panel, Ms. Sheela, Kakde and Christopher Baskeran and Rita Panicker. I really enjoyed listening to them. Now I hand it over to you, Nilakshi, if you could have the other panelists speak.
If I can come in, Nilakshi, can I? Can I come in?
I think her screen is frozen. You could go.
Okay. I agree with Binakshi that what you said, that prejudice is something which is so very unfortunate that we have in our society, and especially in such a diverse country that we are, and so plural. Instead of celebrating it, we keep dividing ourselves over language, over religion, over caste, class, ethnicity. I think the way to break that would be to have alternate narratives. And those alternate narratives need to be out there in the media, And because media plays a very, very powerful role in strengthening these prejudices. I mean, some of our reporting that comes in the mainstream and local newspapers is kind of really, really scandalous. Some of the serials that we have, in our Hindi channels, some of the Bollywood movies, and I remember the Kabir Khan was one of the movies which was pretty toxic, and a lot of the boys who saw that felt that that's what it is to be. It was so toxic. Now, even though we have a law, and in the law ministry, the information and broadcasting ministry does have guidelines on what the producers can, what kind of movies and what language and what should be the storyline and things like that. I was part of one of those things in formulating those guidelines, but somehow, somewhere along the way, the stronger narrative of prejudices keeps coming up over and over again. And I think we need to break it. And I would say that it begins with family, but also within the community and the school, because I see care and protection as a continuum of all these three agencies. If it is the family, the community, and the school, and all these three agencies have a tremendous role to play to break the stereotyping of people, of gender, of age, for that matter. All that all the three agencies have a very, very important and crucial role to play. Thank you.
Dr. Christopher or Sheela ji, would you like to respond or share your insights about this?
Yeah, I agree with Rita ji, and definitely media has a bigger role to play, and that too they have to be very positive about whatever they are showing or presenting. That is what I have to say. We are doing it all that in practice, everyday practice. We are following it to remove the prejudices, and media has a better role to play. If that can be done, it will be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheela ji. Dr. Christopher?
Yeah, breaking stereotypes as well as issues and breaking prejudices. One way of doing it is conscientization through role modeling, where you find positive role models. And at present, I mean, when you look at media, the most powerful media is the social media. How people are doing it at the local level, and if those things can be brought out and people share their opinions in their social media, I think stereotyping can be broken. Because the popular media, like movies, are all mostly, it is a constructed reality. So it is not a real issue. The real ones are the ones who are the change makers at every household or at the social network level. So if people come out to voice or to express, because they are also closely observed as role models, so those things can be understood more clearly, and people could I mean, of course, there are followers to every, if you have a handle to a social media and you have a sort of networks that people follow you through. So that is one of the ones. Of course, movies can make, but people do understand that movies are maybe at the adolescent or the young adult level would be more closer to the movies, but by and large, I think now it is more on the social media. Like they can play a good role in that. Thanks.
So there is another request from the participants. One of the participants also wanted to hear from the esteemed panelists about the need for an attitude that seeks to instill within the members of a family to have an outward looking orientation. Like, for example, what is that common spaces that exist in the world around us, where both men and women can equally contribute towards building society in an environment which provides both to work in harmony towards a united goal, because it is in the requirement of their equal and dynamic contributions to society that we realize the absolute need of their equality that must exist and progressively given expression to. I don't think current existing social and economic structures provide that common goal for both to realize their higher purpose, which they can both try to achieve together. So in a way, one of this theme that we have identified in the background note about family to be more outward oriented. So how family can be more conscious of their moral responsibility towards the well-being of, towards serving the well-being of the society. I don't know if any one of you would like to respond to this.
I would like to respond to that. See, over the years, family has evolved, and the more we have become nuclear, and the more we kind of look inward, we unfortunately do not care about the outside, and that is an issue in our society, that we need to be taking care of our neighbors, our whoever whom we interact with. I mean, I find it so shocking, and at the same time very, very saddened when I find people calling out to people according to what they're doing. Like, for example, in the neighborhood, you would have a vegetable person, guys, bringing in his cart, and you would call him out and say, sabji wala, like as if the sabji wala doesn't have a name. He has a name. Call him by the name. You have a person who comes to pick up your garbage. You will call him the kudawala, but you won't call him Satish, the guy who's coming to pick up. I mean, give him the respect and dignity that he's doing some very valuable work. If he didn't pick up your garbage, we would be in a mess, you know, so give him that respect. So there is a very, very famous and popular proverb, a Nigerian by the Igbo tribe, which says that it takes a whole village to make a child. And that's it. I mean, our neighborhood we do not anymore in the metropolitan cities have that notion of a neighborhood, which we used to have, at least when I was growing up in my childhood. In my neighborhood, my uncles and aunts, all of them were looking out for us. I mean, if we were hanging out late in the park, they would give us a shout and tell us to go home. But today, who cares? I mean, your neighbor, you know, something would happen, you wouldn't even know, for that matter. So that whole, you know, the feeling of community feeling, of being together, it's slowly getting diluted, and we have become more and more of, you know, I, me, and myself. And I think it's time that we start breaking these invisible walls that we have made among ourselves, and go back to our times when, in my generation, my parents' generation, what it was to grow up in a community. I think we need to bring back that. We need to bring back the village. we need to bring back that in our community in urban India or in rural India. And that is the way forward if we have to think about, being compassionate and thinking about others and helping and supporting one another. Thank you.
Rita ji, Dr. Christopher or Sheela ji, Dr. Nanda, would you like to share your insights on that? We have come towards the end of this webinar. I would like to request our speakers for concluding remarks then. Can we start with Dr. Nanda?
Thank you, Nilakshi. It's been a learning experience, and I think as a conference fostering equality within families or engaging with the idea of equal families is a significant step for equality in the nation state, in the country. So I congratulate the organizers for having, initiated this dialogue. As an educational institution, Miranda House is committed to the values of democracy, equality, and would like to foster the same through our students and our teachers. So we take on that message with us. And I personally learned a lot from the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nanda. Sheela ji or Dr. Christopher would like to.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Nilakshi ji, for arranging this webinar. We really learned from each other a lot, and we definitely have a lot of work to do in the society, in the family, for our better nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Nilakshmi, as well as the Office of the Public Affairs of the Baha'is in India. This has been a wonderful and rich learning experience for each of us as we listen to one another and understand the problems that we face and how we would be able to overcome these, especially in addressing gender disparities and move towards gender equality. So this is really a wonderful opportunity that we could listen to each other. That's great. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher.
Yeah, and I also want to thank the participants for their questions that they've been raising on the chat box, as well as on the Q&A. It's very encouraging to see the questions that are being raised. It's really profound. Thank you.
Thank you. Rita ji?
Yeah. Thank you, Nilakshi, and I must also once again thank the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of India for initiating this discourse, this first discourse that you have had on family, which is, I think, a very, very important webinar and a very important discourse that is so very important in today's world, I would say, the kind of strife that is going on. And also like someone mentioned, the pandemic made us all to reflect a lot. And I think we should take this forward. And I hope Baha'is India will take it forward, and you can be assured that there would be support from all of us in this. And there's no two ways about the importance of democratizing family.
Thank you so much. So on behalf of the office, I would like to thank all the panelists for their insights. It's truly been an enriching experience for us. and also the participants who have also posted questions. So friends, this is not the end of this discourse. It will go on, and we will be in touch with each and one of you to further look at the areas that can be explored further. So with that, I thank you once again, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you.